how bad is the situation when we look at the seas of the world in the Arctic and Antarctic?
Gosh, Richard, I wish I could be bearer of some cheery news. However, we have a real ice crisis on our hands. In January, there was a global satellite ice loss survey, and it showed that we've lost some 28 trillion metric tons of ice in the last 30 years. And that the ice loss is now much faster than scientists ever anticipated, especially in the Arctic, where it's warming almost 3 times faster than anywhere else on the globe. And, in a way you want to say, well, who cares? Aren't these just remote frozen wastes, but home to a few polar bears and a few penguins? But we need to care because the ice deflects the sun's heat. And as we lose the ice, the oceans warm. And the more ice we lose, the warmer it all becomes. And so we enter this vicious circle. And we're only beginning to understand the regulating role that the ice caps have in terms of how it impacts ocean circulation, atmospheric circulation, it impacts the jet stream. And, you remember that Texas freeze that we had not that long ago? That was an unprecedented polar vortex. So weather patterns will be much more unpredictable right through to the mid-latitudes. And then, of course, as we lose the ice, we're also losing this very pristine biome with unique species and a whole marine ecology in the ocean that science is really only just beginning to understand. So, the thing with the polar ice is that once it's gone, and it's irrecoverable in our lifetime. And we say at Global Choices that you can't plant ice. So there is a bit of hope. The scientists say that we can keep to 1.5 degrees. It might stabilize. So that should be a massive spur to carbon reduction. And you'd think that we'd be doing all we can to hit our Paris targets and to protect the ice we have, but far from it. There's about $100 billion hovering, waiting for this ice to melt and going into exploitation of these exposed riches. So deep seabed mining for rare earth minerals, oil and gas, a 10-fold predicted increase in shipping, with all the heavy fuel oil and the black carbon that generates. And then this ambitious idea of having a Suez Canal across the transpolar route. And, in such a remote place, you can just imagine, do you remember that ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal? Imagine if we had that in the Arctic and we had an oil spill in such a pristine environment. So, in short, in many ways, it's business as usual. And we really do have to ask ourselves, what have we learned? And it's really a moral question. Just because we can, should we? And should we have business as usual? We feel not. We feel these are increasingly being recognized as global commons, both the Arctic and the Antarctic, because they have such global impacts. And really, as global citizens, we have a collective responsibility to protect them. So that's what we're fighting for.
Inge, thank you for those opening remarks. So appreciate that. Caroline, to you, building on what Inge was saying there, you've been thinking about these problems for quite a bit here, many issues. What do you think we should be focusing on?
Thanks, Richard. Well, I've got a slightly different take on it because what I wanted to look at really was what is the driving force of destruction, whether we are talking about the sea, the air, the land. And, every time I think about, an environmental campaign, a plastics campaign, overfishing, deforestation, pesticides, climate, the thing that is underlining all of those, frankly, is our economic system that puts profit and growth above people and nature. And thinking about our seas, we know, for example, and ministers know that the climate emergency poses a triple whammy of threats, that you've got ocean warming, you've got deoxygenation, you've got acidification, all of these are decimating marine life. Yet the UK, for example, has just given the green light for new oil and gas drilling licenses in the North Sea. And, you have to ask yourself why. We know, and ministers know, that plastics, chemicals, sewage are choking our oceans, polluting our water, harming every ocean species from plankton to polar bears, yet still we treat our seas like a sewer. And again, we have to ask ourselves why. We know that deep sea mining risks catastrophic impacts on seafloor species and habitats, yet instead of backing calls for a global moratorium, The UK government's line is just incredible complacency, essentially saying that they're doing enough. And so I come back to this point that when you think, why, given that we know all of this damage is being done, why do we do it? Well, then it is the economy stupid, I'm afraid. You know, almost 20 years after Bill Clinton's famous election slogan, in today's age of climate and nature crises, it's the economy stupid, I think, has a whole new meaning. So when we ask ourselves, why, you know, when the warning lights are flashing red, why are we still hurtling towards environmental breakdown? It's because we've got a dangerous and outdated economic system. The climate and nature crises are a feature of it rather than a fault of that kind of economics as usual. And that's why we need to redesign the economy to put the health and well-being of people and planet first. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that we stop campaigning on all the other really vital issues like renewable energy or marine conservation zones or fossil fuel divestment. But it does mean that alongside all of those, we also need to confront the economic elephant in the room, if you like. GDP is a gross domestic problem for people and for nature. We need new economic goals and we need them fast. And so to mix my animal metaphors, if we don't confront this economic elephant in the room, we'll continue with a game of environmental whack-a-mole and eventually we'll lose because we'll only be looking at the symptoms of this deadly economic system rather than the causes of it. And so I just wanted to really stress how important it is, I think, to really support those movements that are supporting a shift away from the idea of economic progress based on GDP growth to one that recognizes the value of nature and aims to deliver a good quality of life for all without overshooting environmental limits. That's the essence of the kind of economic reset that we need. Call it well-being economics, call it donut economics, call it whatever you like. But we need to call out this current economic system, which is causing so much human and ecological devastation. Just as Greta Thunberg did when addressing world leaders at the UN Climate Summit in 2019, when she said, we are in the beginning of mass extinction and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. So my plea would be that we use our voices alongside all of the issues that Inge rightly identified, but let's also use our voices to demand a new economy, one fit for the 21st century, one that puts people and planet first. And if I could just be a bit cheeky, and this is really primarily for people in the UK, but there is a petition that I would love people to sign. They can find it on the parliamentary website, petition.parliament.uk. And it's a petition started by someone actually here in Brighton, calling for a shift to wellbeing economics. If we can get 100,000 signatures on that petition, then we'll trigger a debate in the House of Commons in the run-up to the Glasgow Climate Summit. And that debate would exactly be about shifting to a different kind of economic system.